Hook up your Bluetooth speaker or make a phone call and think, how did somebody come up with this? You know, when you think of inventors and you think guys in like lab coats with glasses and bowl cuts and a hunchback, it was probably one of those guys. Well, it wasn't. As it turns out, we have the legendary Hollywood starlet Hedy Lamarr to thank. How did she go from acting in huge Hollywood pictures as a glamour girl to inventing the basis for wireless communication? Well, I'll tell you. Hedy Lamarr was born Hedwig Eva Maria Kessler on November 9, 1914, in Vienna, Austria. As a child, she showed a lot of interest in theater and film, and by age 12, she had even won a local beauty pageant. At the same time, she began to learn about technological inventions through her father. Her father used to take her on walks, and on these walks he would explain how devices function and explain the latest in technological advances, and this made her curious. She started to develop an interest in this as well, but she was a little bit more focused on her film career. She began her film career in the early 1930s as an extra and worked her way up until she landed a lead role in a film called No Money Needed in 1932. That movie became very popular and earned a lot of international recognition. She acted in a few more films, as well as stage plays, and after a while, admirers started sending flowers to her dressing room. She did not like that. She would send the flowers away every time. One of her admirers, however, eventually convinced her to give him a chance. This man was Friedrich Mandel, also known as Fritz. He was a weapons merchant and munitions manufacturer, and also at one point was the richest man in Austria. But there was one big problem. Mandel had a few ties to Mussolini and later a certain dictator who came to power in Germany around this time. And that was an issue because her parents were both of Jewish descent. Now, it becomes a little bit more confusing because Mandel's own father was also of Jewish descent. So, like, it just gets a little murky because clearly he doesn't care. Also didn't seem to bother Hedy very much. And the next year in 1933, Hedy Lamarr and Fritz Mandel got married. She was 18 and he was 33, so there's that. Mandel quickly became very controlling, surprise, surprise, and prevented her from pursuing her acting career. He did not like the fact that she had previously started a film where he felt that the content was a little too sexual. So instead of working as an actress, she would just accompany Mandel at his meetings where people were talking about his business, weapons and manufacturing, inventing new weapons and military technology and blah, 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 blah. All that boring stuff. But that does become more important later in the story. In 1937, Hedy Lamarr decided that she had had enough of her husband's controlling behavior, and she decided she was going to dress up as a maid and sneak out of the house. Now, there are some accounts of people who were at a dinner party that day, allegedly, who said that she had asked for Mandel's permission to wear every piece of jewelry she had, and then she just disappeared in the middle of the night. I don't know. I wasn't there. But according to Hedy Lamarr herself, she says that she had to dress up as one of her maids to sneak out of the house, and she fled to Paris in 1937. She eventually arrived in London, where she ended up meeting Louis B. Mayer, who is the head of MGM, a very huge production company in Hollywood. He had just so happened to be in Europe scouting for talent when he spotted her, and he offered her a $125 a week contract, which she rejected. She felt that wasn't enough money. But Hedy Lamarr is very cunning. She had a plan. She figured out that he was going to be on his way back to America soon, and so she booked herself on the same ship as him back to America, where she bumped into him, and she ended up securing a $500 a week contract, which would be about $11,000 a week today. Louis B. Mayer suggested that she change her name to something a little bit more simple and something that would separate her from her past reputation, because she was kind of well known for this movie that she starred in Europe called Ecstasy. It was very racy, it was very sexual, and at this time, America and the censorship was very heavy. So he did not want her to be associated with that when she moved to America. So together they decided to go with Hedy Lamarr. And in 1938, he decided to start promoting Hedy as the world's most beautiful woman. And it worked out pretty good because the viewers would watch her movies and they would say that when she appeared on the screen, her beauty, quote, took one's breath away. So everything's going great. You know, she's acting in movies, she's doing what she wanted to do. This was the goal. This is why she ran away from Europe in the first place. You know, you would think everything's peachy keen, everything's fine. But no, Hedy had a big problem. She felt that she was being typecast as the glamour girl in all the movies. And while her movies were very successful and people loved her, she didn't really have many lines in the movies. Like, even though she was the lead of the movie, she didn't talk very much because they just figured, well, she's so gorgeous, people will watch the movie anyway. And that worked, but she was getting very bored of playing the same roles over and over and over again. So what does Hedy Lamarr do? Hedy Lamarr does what anybody would do. She started to invent things. She didn't have formal training, but she took any free time she had to design and draft, and she designed a few things like an improved stoplight, a little tablet that you could put in water and it would make a carbonated drink, and one day it hit her. You remember when I said that she used to tag along at her ex-husband's meetings? Her ex-husband, who was the arms dealer, his meetings about military technology and weapons and stuff like that? So, she remembered them saying that the Navy needed a way to control the torpedoes while they were shooting underwater. And they had a way to do it, but the problem was they were controlling the torpedoes with a radio. If the enemy interrupted the frequency and jammed the radio, they would lose control of the torpedo. They were trying to come up with ways that they could communicate with each other without their enemy being able to interfere or figure out what they were doing. So she thought about it and thought about it. She was talking to one of her new friends, George Antheil. He was a composer and a pianist. He had just previously worked on a piece for a ballet. And in the piece, he took several player pianos. And a player piano is kind of like a music box. You put a little roll in there in the player piano and it plays on its own. So he was taking several player pianos and he was putting the same song in each of the pianos. And he was trying to synchronize them so he could play them all at the same time. And while he was explaining this to her, it gave her an idea that they could use that same concept and they could use it on the torpedoes. Basically, instead of using one radio frequency to control the torpedo, they would use multiple of them. So then that way, if the enemy were to try to jam the signal, they wouldn't be able to because it would take too much power to jam it completely. And this is the 1930s, so they didn't quite have that technology yet. So they designed this technology. On August 11th, 1942, Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil were granted a patent for their invention. They get their patent, they get their plans together, and they go to the Navy to propose the technology. And they looked at her invention and said,
"No, that's going to be too big to fit in the torpedoes."
And they actually told her she should do what all the other celebrity starlets were doing and sell war bonds to support the war effort. So basically they said,
Why don't you just stand over there and look pretty?
And this really discouraged her. They just gave up on the whole idea altogether. She went back to acting in her movies, and George went back to composing his songs and playing the piano. But that's not the end of it. In 1962, the patent had expired. And coincidentally, the US military decided,
Oh, you know what? Actually, that invention was a good idea.
And so they actually implemented it to use on the US military ships. All of a sudden, it was a marvelous idea.
Why didn't anybody think of this before?
And they used it on US military ships during the blockade of Cuba. 20 years later, after the patent had expired. Then, in 1997, another 35 years later, the Electric Frontier Foundation gave Hedy and George an award for their incredible invention in 1997, 55 years after the invention was proposed. They presented them with the Pioneer Award, and Hedy Lamarr was also presented with the Belvigrass Spirit of Achievement Award, which is like the Oscars of inventing. She was the first woman ever to be presented with this award in 1997. In 1998, a wireless technology developer acquired a 49% claim to the expired patent from Hedy Lamarr for an undisclosed amount of stock. Hedy and George's technique was used as the basis for all of the wireless technology that followed, including Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and wireless telephone. In 2014, 14 years after her death, Hedy Lamarr was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. So, what's the lesson here? Don't let them typecast you. You can do anything in the world that you want to do, whether you're a Hollywood starlet or a nerd in a lab coat. If you put your mind to it, you can do whatever you want. And in 55 years, you too will be recognized for your talent. Regardless, I hope you feel inspired by the story. Let me know what else you want to see in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.